What's up, everybody? Triple Crown 24 back with another installment of the Super Collectors podcast. Today, I am joined by a Kirby Pucket Super Collector. We're going back to the 90s. It's Dustin Abraham from Dustin Blake. Dustin, welcome aboard, and also happy birthday as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, so Dustin is here to talk today about what we like in terms of collecting players, how we choose our players. We're also going to talk about the Facebook group that he manages. I think your camera might be frozen there, but we'll roll with it as it is. Oh, there we go. We have a little bit of a different filming setup today. It's frozen on a picture of your lap. Oh, there we go. We got you back. All right. All right, guys, so we're going to jump into the introduction here today, learn a little bit more about Dustin's collection before we get started. The camera's cutting in and out. I apologize for the technical difficulties today, guys. We're just going to roll with it as it is. So, Dustin, just tell us a little bit about your collection and how'd you get started collecting your player.
All right. Well, I collect Kirby Pucket, as you said. I have, I believe, 754 unique cards. Just started doing this, I want to say, in April of this year. I want to give a special shout out to Big D for Life and Bronx Bombers cards. I came up with this sort of race to 1,000 thing. We all kind of same amount of our player. We all had about 300 cards of our respective players, and so we kind of just rolled with it. And we actually started like a little Facebook chat with the three of us and Eloy the Goat and Pepino Man, and that whole thing kind of just inspired me to create the Super Collectors group. And so, yeah.
Gotcha. For your player in particular, Kirby Pucket, how'd you get started with him?
Okay. Yeah. I don't know how much you want me to talk about it because I know it's the subject of the day and we're going to talk about it later. But just I'm like you. I'm a homer. You know, I love my home teams, and Kirby's one of the greatest twins of all time, and player that I grew up watching when I was a kid, and just always liked him. Always been a fan favorite. Always been a favorite of mine. So that's how I got into him.
I can definitely relate to that. I would say that most of the guests that we'll have on the podcast or we've previously had would also be able to relate to that. So we did mention the Facebook group earlier. I do want to mention today that I will leave a link to it down below. It is called Super Collectors Unite. It is a page that Dustin created himself on Facebook, so you can go check that out. He's also on YouTube as Dustin Blake. I kind of got thrown off in the beginning, so I forgot to do my usual intro, but you can go check out his YouTube channel where you can see more about his collection. And if you want to see any of the cards that he might talk about today, I'm sure that they're in a video somewhere. He also does some box breaks with his son as well as some different videos as well. So be sure to check that out. And of course, today we are powered by StreamYard. If you have any need to produce a show kind of like this one, feel free to check out StreamYard. Highly recommend it. They don't pay me to say that. I just say it out of the goodness of my heart. So we'll get into kind of the segment here to talk about your collection. And before we get to the topic of the day, you said, what was your count again on Kirby Pucket?
754, I think.
So you are definitely well on the race to 1,000 there. What are some of the key cards that you have for Kirby Pucket? Do you have any autographs, relics, rookies, anything like that?
I have a ton of relics. I have almost all of the rookies, and I do have one autograph. Kirby, his autographs are very expensive. So if you find a certified pack pulled one, if you find one for $200, you got a really good deal on it. So the one I have, I can't show you today because it is off at PSA getting slabbed, hopefully, and authenticated. So yeah, Kirby's kind of a unique unique player to collect because of the amount of years he played. He didn't play for a long time, so it's sort of hard to. He doesn't have a ton of cards out there. I think there was like 3,100, a little over that is what Trading Card Database has listed. So it's kind of a challenge finding stuff for him. I don't have the luxury also. I mean, I guess it's not a luxury, but I'm on the Nate's page, rare inserts in 90s and early 2000s, and there's not a lot of stuff for Kirby. Not a lot of pretty shiny fancy cards for Kirby, unfortunately. But it's also fortunate too, because those can be very expensive and hard to pick up.
Right. That was one of the questions that I was going to ask about, is because he is not really, I mean, all due respect to the Twins, who just crushed my Tigers so far this week to clinch the AL Central last night. There you go, right there. The Twins head into the postseason, but really a team, despite their success, especially in the early 90s, not the largest fan base compared to some of the teams and players that we've covered or will cover in the future, and a lot of those 90s stars, a little bit bigger names than Kirby himself. So how do you feel about him missing from certain sets? Is there like a set that you really wish he was in that he's not?
Not so much. I mean, when he played, he was very popular among Twins fans and baseball fans in general. So, I mean, if there's an insert set in the 80s and early 90s, he's in it. So, for the most part. So really just the fact that he had to retire prematurely. So he's not in a lot of those 97, 98, 99, 2000s. He's not in those. And so that kind of hurts, but I guess much in most of the sets.
Definitely. There's one thing about him that I would say is unique compared to a lot of the 80s and 90s stars, and that would be his rookie. So the Griffey rookie that everyone goes after is the 89 Upper Deck. The Jeter is usually the 93 SP or the 93 Tops. Kirby's is a little unique. A lot of people will consider his 85 Tops the rookie. Some people consider the lesser known 84 Flir Update as rookie. Which one would you consider as true rookie, and do you have a copy of either card?
Yeah, I can show you. I have most of them here. So here's the 84 Flir Update, and this is his XRC, or extended rookie. So this is not quite his rookie per se, because you couldn't pull this from a pack. You had to buy a factory set in order to get this card. So his official rookie, or one of them, would be the 85 Tops. And then the 85 Donruss is another one. And I do have the 85 Flir, but I didn't bring it with me today. So yeah, the Tops is probably his most recognizable rookie card, but the Flir Update is his most desirable rookie card, or XRC.
Can you explain what makes the 84 Flir Update so rare compared to the 85 Tops?
Just the print run was lower on these update sets than the regular base sets. So, and I suppose also because it's just an earlier card, it's his first card, his first official card. Although he does have one minor league card, which is the 83 Frisch Visalia Oaks card, and that's a pretty rare card and pretty expensive. I do not have that one.
Those minor league team issue ones and the promotional ones are very difficult to come by. A lot of collectors will tell you that. Pretty much anybody from the 80s and onwards who is collected has a few of those tough ones. So I definitely relate to that. The 84 Flir Update is kind of an interesting rookie as well, because it's really along with the Clemens from that set, the first two big rookie cards that came in a box issued set, or they came in a non like series release or traditional release, so such as Top Series 1, Series 2, kind of helped open the door for update series. Would you say that that's kind of an accurate statement?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate, and that's another part of the reason why it's a desirable card, because there was no 83 Flir update set.
Right. That's so it's the first of its kind. That's why a lot of people they don't consider the Mansell 52 the rookie. We won't get into that debate today, but because it's the first modern top set, we won't count 51 because it's kind of a different deal. And Mantle is that first set. It does add a little bit more value to it because he is the first one. So 84 Flir update really is a pioneer set, and it's really cool that Puckett stands alone as the Hall of Famer in that set right now. Clemens, I imagine, will get there one day, but as of the time of this recording, it's just Puckett. So kind of moving on to a little bit more about the different cards in your collection. What would you say is your Mount Rushmore of your Kirby Pucket cards?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that one a lot, and it's a difficult question. My auto that I have would probably be on there, the 84 Flir, and just in terms of, not in terms of value, but in terms of how important the card is, I would put the 85 Tops on there. I have a 95 Select Certified Mirror Gold that is just a beautiful card. I don't have it with me today, but I actually have two copies of it. I have one in a slab and I have one raw, but that's a card that I like a lot. I have a ton of jersey and back cards that are just beautiful. Here's another card that I want to show that has very little monetary value, but has a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? It's sentimental value. And this is the 92 score Procter and Gamble All-Star card. I have it in a PSA 10. And it's not a valuable card, like I say, but it was a card that you could send into with like your Sunday paper. You'd have like a coupon and you'd send in like $3 shipping and they'd send you the whole set. And that was something I remember doing when I was, I think I was 8 or 9 years old. Would have been 9 years old, maybe 8. I would have been 8 in the summer of 92. So I remember cutting that coupon out and sending it in the mail and getting the set. So that's why it's kind of a sentimental card for me. Pretty cool looking card too.
Is that the same one that you got yourself, or is that one that you bought at a different time?
No, this is not the same one. I bought this. It was already slabbed.
Okay, I was going to say.
And it was actually the PSA 10 that I ever owned of anybody, not just Kirby.
That's pretty sweet. I was going to be very impressed if that was the same card that you were able to keep as a kid and it stayed in Gem Mint 10 condition. I know that a lot of mine did not stay that way. They were 9s pretty much right out of the pack, and then they dropped a little bit after that. What would you say? It sounds like you have a lot of the big ones already. Are there any kind of bucket list cards that you're looking to add at some point on your road to 1,000 or at any point in time?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few because I don't have a lot of expensive cards of his other than the autograph and the 84. I don't really have very many of his high price ones. So I mentioned the 83 Visalia Oaks card. I'd like to get the Topps Tiffany of his rookie card, 1985. I need a Topps Finest Refractor, 93 and 94. And then two other ones that are pretty affordable that I haven't bought, and it's just been the right card hasn't popped up. Like either it's been the price is wrong, or the card is wrong, or the timing is wrong. So just the reasons why I've never picked up these two. They're fairly affordable, and one is the 92 Donruss Elite. You can get that for $30, and then the other one is the 91 Topps Desert Shield. and that's probably a $50 card. So those are two that I know I'll pick up soon. Just the right time and right everything hasn't popped up yet for me. I'm trying to be patient with them.
Definitely. Patience is certainly very important with super collecting. It is very easy to want to just sprint to the finish and try to get all those very desirable cards, but part of the fun is the chase. In fact, that's pretty much a large portion of it. So would you say your approach to it is just kind of picking up the lower end ones as you go along and then just getting a few of the higher end ones, or what kind of way do you tackle adding more?
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of try to rotate a little bit so I don't bore myself. I'll try and get a big stack of 20 or so of the lower end cards on COMC or Sportlots or even eBay, and I'll usually get a big lot of cards that I don't need lower end 50-cent cards, and then I'll get maybe 3 or 4 or 5 to $10 cards, and then I'll get maybe a $20 card. You know, I try to mix it up a little bit. Unfortunately, I'm running out of those 50-cent cards. I don't have too many of those left to get.
I'm right there with you, my friend. I'm experiencing the same problem right now. So when you get to that point, what do you do when you have to take that next step and you can't just get base and inserts anymore? You have to start tackling some of the numbered stuff or some tougher inserts.
Yeah, it's tough for me because I am on a pretty strict budget. I've got my kids are all in school, and I spend a lot of time and money on them and other family things. So I don't have an unlimited budget. So it is very tough. That's why I have to be patient. I have to look for the right deal. And another thing too is when you go to card shows and stuff, which I don't have many of them around me, but when I do, the Kirby stuff is really overpriced. Any home team cards are going to be high priced. You might have noticed that too if you're, in Michigan hunting for Tigers cards. They're probably more expensive than they are here in Minnesota.
I've definitely noticed that. For those of you guys who don't know, I don't go to shows like in the Detroit area, which does help me with my super collection because a lot of my players are undervalued, but there is definitely that hometown element that goes to it. And I imagine Puckett is probably really a solid player in the hearts of many, just based on the age demographic of who would be a fan of him. One thing you did mention was one thing you did mention was your son, and as we talked about earlier, his YouTube channel is called Dustin Blake. So his son Blake also has a small super collection going of Royce Lewis. Was that something that you influenced, and how did he go about starting that?
Okay, well, really, we went to Twins Fest one year, and he got to meet Royce Lewis and spend a little bit of time with him, and that made him, really dig Royce and really want to get some of his cards and autographs. And one cool story about Royce Lewis was I took a picture at Twins Fest of my son with Royce Lewis, and I got a couple copies made, and I sent one of the copies down to spring training for Royce to sign. And I included a thank you card telling him thank you for being good to my son and signing autographs, posing for pictures, all that. And I also included my YouTube webpage address. And so he actually went on our channel and watched. And I know this because he inscribed the card or the photo with something that Blake said in one of our videos, which Blake is known for dabbing at the end of every video or most videos. And so he wrote on there, P.S. dab on them haters. And so that was pretty cool.
That's a one-of-a-kind item. I don't think you're going to find that anywhere else. Good luck trying to write a Royce Lewis dab on them haters autograph. Yeah, that's definitely awesome, and we'll get to that here in a minute when we talk about why we choose certain players. So, since you're probably a big part in assisting Blake in picking up the Royce Lewis cards, what would you say is the biggest difference between collecting a current player, or in this case, a prospect, compared to collecting your player who is been retired for a long time now?
Okay. We also collect Miguel Sano to a certain extent. So we're running all three of those. And I also collect Harmon Killebrew. So that's four very different eras and types of players to collect. So it's crazy the sheer amount of cards that players have nowadays, because Royce Lewis has not even passed AA ball, and he already has like 1,000 cards, different cards to get. I don't know the exact number, but it's a lot. And so they start giving these kids cards when they're 15 years old. And it's just crazy and hard to keep up with all the different parallels and everything. It's wild. Like I love collecting Kirby variations, and it's nothing compared to Royce Lewis or Miguel. The stickers, the top stickers, like 89 top stickers, is one of the big ones for Kirby, because there's so many different variations. There's variations of him as the back of the card, and variations of him as the front of the card, and then there's variations of who is on the flip side of every sticker, and that's kind of neat to search for those, especially because they're pretty cheap. But all the numbered and colored, they're beautiful cards, but they're just, they're a little bit too much for me.
That has been a critique of some people who collect players who are still around, or players who are pretty big names where they are still featured in those Chrome Prism type products, where there are so many parallels. I believe this year's Prism had about 24 different parallels for Panini, so it's really getting ridiculous. Some of the ones that are going out there, it creates more of a challenge. So I imagine that if Blake sticks with it, you guys are going to have no problem having any shortages on Royce Lewis cards, since he probably has about half of what Puckett has, and he hasn't even played a major league game yet, which is kind of astonishing.
Right. Yeah. And I don't think, maybe Blake will do this, but I don't ever plan on trying to do any rainbows of anybody unless I somehow get a 1 of 1 by accident. I'm not going to even try.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult to put together those rainbows, especially when you're trying to hunt down the 1 of 1. Even the out of 5 cards, as some of you guys who watch some of my other videos will know, just as difficult to put together. So it's kind of nice to be able to just pick and choose which ones you want, choose the colors and parallels you want, because it is very tough these days to build rainbows. So we'll kind of move into our topic of the day, which is choosing the player that you like to collect. So we talked a little bit about your son's, how he kind of got that connection to Royce Lewis. For Kirby Puckett, did you ever meet him or have any in-person encounters with him?
Never had any in-person encounters with Kirby at all. Seen him play live at the Metrodome, but never actually met him. The way that that he became my favorite player, when I was, the first World Series that I remember was the 91 World Series. I was eight years old, and I was watching my home team in the World Series. So the 87 World Series, that happened in my lifetime, but I was a little kid, and I was 4 years old. I don't remember it. But I liked Kirby, but I wouldn't even have said he was my favorite player at the time. But in Game 6 of the World Series, I'm watching it at home, and Kirby makes a crazy catch on the wall, and I think it was Ron Gant who hit it, and he climbed the wall pretty much and made a great leaping catch. You know, saved a run or two. I think it would have been a double probably, at least, maybe triple. And that was awesome. So then every time the commercials were on, I was pretending to make that catch, you know. And, you know, then it ended up going and extra innings, and Kirby Puckett hit the game-winning home run, and that pretty much cemented him as my hero at that time.
So that's an example of a moment that really solidified someone's affinity for a player. Do you think that's a pretty popular occurrence where people can remember a certain moment for a player without having to have met them, that kind of solidifies their passion for collecting that player?
I definitely think so, especially for collectors of players from that era, early 90s, late the 80s. There's all these sort of historical moments in baseball, and if you can live through one and have a connection with it already, you know, just the fact that it was my home team, the team that I loved, that can cement it even more into your brain and into your collecting.
Yeah, definitely. And I've experienced that too with the players that I've collected over the years. We'll move into something that I get asked about somewhat more frequently, especially since we started the podcast. And that is for people who want to start getting into player collecting, because I believe it's becoming more and more popular, especially with 90s players, as more and more people from that generation are able to have that income to be able to spend the money on those cards. Once again, that they maybe once owned when they were kids or had chased after when they were kids. So we'll talk about, if you're starting a collection right now, how would you go about choosing a player to collect if you're looking for someone who is now out of baseball?
Yeah, I guess just the memories of that you have of players that you watched when you were a kid. Those could inspire you on who you collect. Also, if you were a collector in the past, who did you collect when you were a kid, or what's a memory that you have of collecting? Now, I remember probably the first pack, probably not the first pack I ever opened, but the first pack that I remember was a 91 Topps, and I pulled a Wade Boggs card out of that pack. And I don't know if you know what that card looks like, but it's a perspective shot, you know, from the ground up at Wade Boggs standing there at the bat, and behind him in the background is all these dark blue clouds. Just a great photo. And that just sort of struck me, and that struck me as a baseball card collector. And then later that year, the World Series is how I got into Kirby Pucket. But I actually bought a Gem Mint 10 of that Wade Boggs card, even though I'm not a Red Sox fan, not a Wade Boggs collector. But that had a lot of meaning to me, so I made sure that I had that in my collection when I got older.
Do you think that there's a premium on the secondary market for nostalgic cards that we had when we were younger?
Yes, I do. You can tell me that Beckett says that this card is worth 15 cents all you want, but people are going to pay for it more than 15 cents, you know. Even though there's a bazillion of every card, people are still going to pay for memories and for nostalgia and sentimental value. It's going to make the price of these cards go up a little bit.
Right. I've got a card somewhere over here. This one right here has really been blowing up a lot lately. A lot of people opening up some old 90s score boxes to kind of chase the nostalgia on this card of a player that is very popular in terms of super collecting. I don't believe we have any in the group that you started right now, which kind of surprises me a little bit because I think everybody has a Bo Jackson card in their collection. What are some of the biggest nostalgia cards that you would say are kind of out there and good ones to choose if you want to start a player collection?
That one's a great one. I also remember the Bo Breaker card where he's breaking the bat over his knee. Those early 90s score cards were great for those types of cards. The Dream Team cards were great, especially the 91 Dream Team cards. Any of the stadium clubs back then, they always, and they still do, have beautiful photography. They've always been known for that. And in the mid 90s, Stadium Club had some great looking insert cards. The Ringleaders one in particular is one that I like, that has usually has like an eagle or something in the background. Those are great ones. The I think it was 91 Pro Set, or no, not Pro Set. 91 Flir Pro Visions. That's what I mean to say. The 91 Flir Pro Visions are a good nostalgia card. They're an art card. They have some cool paintings on them. I think there's a Ricky Henderson and a Will Clark, and there is a Kirby. What else? Just any of those cards that just pop up in your head from that time that you collected.
You mentioned a lot of great sets there, and I imagine there's going to be quite a few people who might be watching this interested in seeing if their player has a card in some of those sets if they don't already know or don't already own them. What kind of resources would you recommend using to kind of research if a player, say that I'm looking to get into collecting Bo Jackson, I want to know which sets he has cards in. How would I go about doing that, would you say?
Okay, I would go to Trading Card Database. It's I think it's tradingcarddb.com, and type in your player's name, and you should be able to. They should have a checklist that you can print off. And it's not the end all, know all of that player. I mean, if they say there's 3,200 cards of that player, there's probably 3,500 cards or more. You know, they're not all inclusive. They can't be perfect, but that's a good resource that I would recommend checking out for that purpose.
Yeah, nice thing about that too is on a lot of the cards they're going to have those photos too, so you can actually see what the card looks like and get yourself acquainted with it before you go out looking for it on, say, an eBay, or if you're at a show or something where the card information is not available to you right in front of you like it is online. You'll be able to know what exactly you're looking at, and a lot of times there are dealers who won't know exactly what they're looking at as well. So that's about retired players. Let's look at current players, because I know that there's quite a few of the questions that I've gotten before are from younger collectors or people who want to start super collections of younger players. What would you recommend looking for in terms of guys who are in the game right now?
Okay. Well, like I said before, I'm a homer, so the first thing I look at is do they play? Do I have a connection to them? And I know that a lot of people collect players that don't even play for the teams that they root for or their home teams, and that's fine. That's a good thing. I know a ton of people collect Ken Griffey Jr. and he's probably the best example of somebody that sort of transcended that. Like, you didn't cheer for him because he was for your team or for your home team. You cheered for him because he was great. You know, I'd say probably Mike Trout might be the most comparable person to him right now. Michael Jordan is another good example of that too. You know, you didn't have to be a Bulls fan to be a Michael Jordan fan. So as far as players nowadays, just look for. I mean, I'm of the belief that you don't collect a player because their cards are cool. You collect player because they're cool. You know, Like, do you like the way they play the game? Do you like their personality? Do they do charity work for the community? You know, there's 100 different things to look at. But that's definitely what I recommend. I mean, if you are a kid and you can't watch every baseball game, you know, maybe all you can get on your TV is your home team, if even. Just watch Baseball Tonight, watch Sports Center, watch the highlights, watch what these players do, and pick somebody that you would want to emulate if you were gonna play baseball, or as a person in life too. Pick somebody that you would want to look up to.
One of the issues that comes up commonly would be commitment to a player. So when a player's retired, it's much easier because you know what they've done. The jury is pretty much no longer out on that player. Whereas with a Trout, probably one of the fewest safe bets you have. There are those who are kind of in that future Hall of Famer class, your Pujols, your Beltre, well, he's retired now, but your Cabreras, your Kershaws, your Verlanders, those types of guys who are pretty safe bets, who have a lot of cards by now. Let's say we're looking at someone who's really popular, like an Aaron Judge, a Mookie Betts, a Ronald Acuna Jr. How do you prevent basically getting burned on a guy like that who maybe isn't as proven over a long course of period, or their eventual fate is not yet determined?
You really don't. I mean, even with Mike Trout, as great of a player as he is, he's been known to have injury problems. I mean, he could go out and get hurt and never play a game again. You don't know. I mean, he's still going to be one of the greats just because of what he's done in the short amount of time that he played. But he might not end up being a Hall of Famer if he gets hurt, you know, tomorrow or today. There's really no way to avoid it. The biggest thing, I think, besides the player not living up to the standards or living up to the hype, is being traded. I've thought about that a lot with Blake collecting Royce Lewis and Miguel Sano. Is he going to keep collecting them if they end up playing for a different team? With Royce Lewis, probably he would still close because of the personal connection that we have with him. But I don't know. I mean, when we started our Miguel Sano was at a time when Miguel Sano was a very hot player in the major leagues. He was an all-star a few years ago and really hasn't lived up to that. You know, he hit 30-something home runs this year, but, I mean, he's batting like 245 or something like that. You never know what's going to happen. There's really no way to avoid it. You just have to be committed or willing to just walk away.
That's definitely, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And the trade thing is definitely a big part of it. From personal experience, I met Justin Verlander one time. It was not a pleasant interaction, but I had met him, I guess, one other time where it was a little bit better. But when he was traded away, I really lost a lot of my passion for wanting to pick up his cards just because I didn't have that personal connection with him. I don't really have a crazy Justin Verlander collection by any means, but definitely it was very discouraging. So with how often players move around today, it's got to be, you're going to be very hard pressed to find someone like a Jeter, who is pretty much I know this term gets thrown around a lot today, a generational talent, but also a talent that stays with one team his entire career. Of course, he also stayed with the most collected team in baseball of all time. So with building personal connections is probably a good way to reduce the risk of that. How can you build a personal connection with a player? You mentioned watching highlights, those kind of things. How can you really build that so that you don't have any regrets or feel burned later on down the road if you're collecting?
Can you repeat that question? You were breaking up a little bit.
Oh yeah, sorry. So a lot of players, basically there's a chance involved with every single player. There could be injury, like you said. There could be them traded. Whatever the case may be, how do you develop that connection with the player that will soften the blow if something happens to their career that kind of goes against your own motives?
That's a tough one. I mean, yeah, Blake has that personal collection with personal connection with a few different players, but that's not something that you can always easily get. So without actually meeting a player, or interacting with them or whatever, I really don't know how to answer that. If you sort of have to make a decision from the beginning. If you're going to start a super collection of a current player, you have to say, is this who I want to collect? Am I willing to collect this player no matter what happens to them? If they get traded, am I still going to want to collect them? If they get hurt, am I still going to want to collect them? If your answer is no to either of those questions, then I wouldn't recommend even starting super collecting them. You can still collect them as your PC. You can still pick up cards here and there, but I wouldn't recommend you focusing the majority of your collecting on a player unless you're willing to say, that's okay. I'm okay with those things.
What do you think about social media's role in creating a connection with a player? Because our players are more accessible now than ever. For example, when you were growing up, to talk to Kirby Puckett or have any kind of interaction or to kind of hear from him, you're going to have to read about him in the newspaper, one of his interviews, maybe see a post-game interview on television, but you have to catch it on TV live, or you have to go meet him in person at a ball game or some kind of event. Social media now allows us to actually see players and hear their thoughts and kind of see them outside of just this baseball player perspective. Is that something that you can use to develop a connection, would you say?
Yeah, I think you can to a certain extent. It's amazing how much the world's changed since I was a kid. And I'm thinking about all the things as I'm listening to you ask this question. My mind's going everywhere because opportunities to have these players, not just through social media, but through meeting them. Blake has the opportunity to meet players through like the Twins Caravan, where the state has the opportunity to meet them at Twins Fest, which takes place at the stadium. And I didn't really have those opportunities. But then when I'm a kid and I'm going to be all over the place on this. When I also thinking about when I went to Vikings training camp when I was a kid. Now, when I was little, to the Vikings training camp, the players, and they walked out, and you walked right up to the paragraphs. You got photos with them, all that. And if you went to the training camp today, that doesn't happen. You don't get to walk right up to the players and get their autographs. If you're lucky, you can get somebody to sign as they're passing by, and you're on the other side of a fence. You don't get to walk right up to the players. You're closed off for them, and that has a lot to do with that players are now versus how they were. And I think social has a little bit to do with creating celebrity. Probably have a little bit to do with who you want to super collect. My son, he follows a lot of people on Instagram, and players post all kinds of photos and videos of themselves. And I think it is a good way to look into the personality of those players, and know that more about them just than besides what they do on the field or the court or whatever. Another good example is Blake used to collect Antonio Brown cards. He used to be a big Antonio Brown fan, and he started following some of his favorite football players on Instagram. So that'd be Antonio Brown, Stephon Diggs, Odell Beckham, a lot of these players. And he's a big fan of the sort of diva type wide receivers. But as he followed them, he kind of figured a few things out. And he kind of figured out he doesn't like Antonio Brown, that he's a strange person, that there's something off about him. And so way before all of these controversies started, he kind of fell out of love with Antonio Brown. But I'm sorry, I'm all over here. But yeah, social media, kids today get a little bit of a bond with their players, get to know them as a person, and that would in trade give them a little bit more of a connection with them.
No, I really appreciate your insights into that. You touched on a lot of really great points. I believe I heard something that like the Vikings won't allow adults or anyone like over the age of 15 to get autographs at training camp anymore. Was it them or was it like the Eagles or someone?
I think it was the Vikings, yeah.
Okay, so that's something that is definitely,
which I'm totally okay with that.
Right. It's going to make it harder for the adults out there because that's probably the majority of our listeners who might be thinking about starting a super collection or are curious about what kind of players to get involved with. So for adults, social media might not be the most accessible thing or the most familiar medium. Would you think of anything that would be a good way for adults to connect with players outside of social media?
Okay, the first thing that popped in my head is the wrong answer because it's social media. But YouTube is social media, but it's also a great thing for archiving sports. If there's any players, say for example, Fran Tarkenton. I never got to watch Fran Tarkenton play football, but I can go on YouTube and type in Fran Tarkenton highlights, and I can see a lot of video footage of him. So I think that even though technically YouTube is social media, I feel like older folks are more in touch with YouTube than they would be with Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever else there is out there nowadays. But yeah, I know kids, but I don't use them all. But
right.
other than that, man, you're asking me some good questions. I don't know the answers to. Well, I would say, man, how do you connect with the players?
I have one idea.
I would say you're gonna have to connect with the cardboard, with the cards, and you're gonna have to find something that and just go with it. When we first started collecting, it was mainly Blake was collecting and I was curating, and I wanted to start collecting something of my own, you know. And so I started to collect Washington Senators cards, and there's two reasons behind that. One, I bought a 33 Gaudy. I just wanted to own a 33 Gaudy. I didn't care who it was. The player that I bought is a player by the name of Muddy Rule. And the card is beautiful. He was a catcher, and he's all in his full catcher's gear on the card. And he played for, I think it was the St. Louis Browns on the card. And I looked him up on Wikipedia and read a lot of interesting facts about him, and also that he played for the Washington Senators and played for their lone World Series team. Well, they had two World Series teams. They won one and lost one. And it sparked a fascination with the Washington Senators because I knew that they eventually became the Minnesota Twins. So I think if something strikes you can research it, and that can give you connection with the player or the team.
That's
we
a
have
very good
all
point.
the information in the world at the tip of our fingers.
Yeah, using the internet as a research tool definitely can help build that connection. There are certain things about Cabrera that I have connected with more. Like you brought up YouTube, for an example. That was something, one of the moments that I did not witness personally, but I have gone back to watch, was his home run in the World Series off of Roger Clemens at, I think, 20 years old. And that's a moment now that is one of the more memorable ones that I have experienced in his career. And I was able to get that through research and through YouTube. I know it wasn't all that long ago, but it was part of those mediums that you were talking about. So those two that you mentioned are great resources. We talked about social media. We talked about a variety of topics. So that's what I would definitely encourage you guys to go check out if you're interested in starting a super collection. One last one that came to mind as we kind of wrap up today is using the inspiration from various collectors out there. So you run a Facebook group that has a lot of different super collectors and of a lot of different players from several different sports. Have you ever used anybody else's pickups as inspiration for your own, even if they're not collecting your player?
Have I ever used anybody what?
Have you ever used someone else's pickups that they've posted on the group as inspiration for you to pick up?
Oh, have I used anybody else's pickups as inspiration? Yeah, definitely. Especially I like a lot that that Eric posts. You had him on this podcast, Oakland A's 915, because he played in a similar time as Kirby Puckett. So when he posts a card, I'll often, if a cool looking card, I'll often say, I wonder if Kirby has a card in that set. Besides that, you get all kinds of great ideas from these other collectors, whether they collect a similar player or not. You get ideas on how they store their collection. You get ideas on how they catalog their collection. You get ideas on where to go for information on cards, resources, what kind of supplies to use. I mean, everybody on that page has something to offer, and that's what I like about it.
I totally get that too, and I'm very glad to be a member of that group and be able to interact with everyone and see all their collections. If you're interested in it, I will leave a link to the description down below. And also, one of the things you might find on that page is a podcast that Dustin did along with Dustin Bellinger, who will be a future guest on this podcast at some point. And they talked about super collecting in general. It's a video I would highly recommend. In fact, this one's about to wrap up, so now you have no excuse but to go watch that one right now. I'll leave a link to that in the description down below as well. Dustin, I really want to thank you for coming on today and talking about it. I felt like we had a really good discussion. Do you have any final thoughts or anything that you wanted to share we haven't covered already?
Yeah, just one final thought on the super collectors group. I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks like this, but I'll be looking through cards or I'll purchase cards and I'll come across a card and I'll say, man, that's a cool card. That's got to be pretty unique. All right, so I'll look on our little list. Somebody collects that guy, I'm shooting them a photo of that card right away, and if they don't have it, I'm mailing it to them. I don't care. Most of the time, I don't want anything in return, and I know there's a lot of guys on that group that are the same way, or they might just want to trade, or they might, give you a great deal on it if they don't want to trade or give it away. So I definitely recommend you checking that group out, and I definitely think it'll help your collection.
I will definitely vouch for that. I usually get about 4 to 5 messages a week from people on Facebook about Miguel Cabrera cards. I know, Dustin, you've sent me a few for my collection as well. There's a lot of people looking out for one another, and a lot of people, if you do collect the same player, a lot of times people are willing to, offer up their duplicates if you don't have a particular card. So it's definitely a great resource. It's a very encouraging community as well. We want to see each other's collections grow since we can pretty much appreciate it. But that's all the time we're going to have for today. Again, I want to thank Dustin for coming on the show. I also want to thank StreamYard for powering today's podcast. Make sure you guys go check out Dustin Blake. I'll leave a link to their channel down below. You can see more about Dustin's Kirby Pucket collection. You can also go check out the Facebook group, which I'll leave down below. If you have any additional comments you want to leave, we'd love to continue the discussion with you. I'm sure Dustin will check the comments, as I'll be checking them as well, as you guys know. And if you have any suggestions for future guests that you'd like to see on the Super Collectors podcast, be sure to leave those down below as well. I've got a few that I'm planning on recording. Hopefully we'll get 2 out in the month of October. We only did 1 this month, but there's a lot of big guests still to come. So Dustin, once again, thank you. And I want to thank everyone else who stayed through and watched till the end today.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for listening to all my rambling.
All right, guys, we'll see you guys next time. Until then, have yourselves a good one.